about it in this structure, right? Do you want me to start over or I didn't?
No, no, you
Okay.
don't have to.
Okay. All right. I'll keep going. So yeah, when we think about libraries, we definitely have these constraints. And so what's been exciting in this work is really taking this a little bit further and beginning to reimagine what libraries could look like as a place for nature connection. And so, really thinking about how the library can embed nature into our programming, nature into our facilities, into our services, as well as into our operations through staff engagement and through services that the library offers. And that's something that Austin Public Library has been working towards these last couple years is really embedding it into all areas of our library beyond just our story walks and beyond our library programming. And so, for those of you that may not be familiar with Austin, just some context. Austin is a beautiful city. I'm sure everyone who's here today or listening or catching the webinar later is also in a very wonderful city. Things that are unique to Austin is that there's a lot of green spaces and park spaces. There's a lot of connections to nature, although the city hasn't always necessarily been that way, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides. But generally, people like Austin. It's a great place for accessing nature and to learn about nature. And that makes Austin Public Library, very uniquely situated to provide these nature connections. As I mentioned, Austin is a city connecting children to nature site. And what that is, it's a national initiative that seeks to create more equitable and abundant access to nature in cities through partnerships, programming services. And CCCN's Austin vision and mission is to strive that every child has access to and has a connection to nature every single day. And we're very fortunate in Austin to be part of this network because it's a lot of support. And what this looks like is Austin has 5 different strategies in our as a site. And so one of them is Green School Parks, which provides co-located park services on school parkland and public land. There's nature play components. There is early childhood as one of the strategies, and then emerging green leaders as another strategy. And then the 5th strategy is the nature smart libraries. So again, we're one of 5 city strategies that's working together as a collaborative to connect children and families to nature through a variety of things. And these are 5 examples of how we're doing that. So here's a little bit of an evolution of how we got here. In 2016, Austin received a strategic planning and implementation grant from CCCN, and that led to a lot of research that went into the city to identify potentially barriers to accessing nature, which in 2017 led to the city's adoption to the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights, as well as it began to collect data on nature deficient areas in the city of Austin. In 2018, it focused on green school parks, nature play, youth leadership, as well as a full-time position to help this coordination of the city strategies. In 2019, brought on OLE, which is the Early Childhood Initiative. And then in 2020, Austin Public Library came on board as an additional strategy with the Nature Smart Library strategy. And that was about the time of the pandemic. And so we kind of went into this really excited to be part of the work. And then the library closed to the public along with other critical infrastructures. And so we definitely saw a pause on the work. However, in 2021, we brought on some more full-time employees, as well as 2022, some more kind of joint use sites coming on board. And then 2023 to present, I started with Austin Public Library at the end of 2022. And so at the beginning of 2023, this strategy was kind of put under my portfolio, course of work, duties as assigned. And I became the strategy chair and helped really begin to implement some of this work into all areas of the library's operations. And if you are not familiar with Austin Public Library, here's just some general information. As a librarian, I'm probably going to hit you with a lot of information, so I'll try to keep it brief. But Austin Public Library was established in 1926. We'll be celebrating our centennial anniversary next year, which is 100 years of service. We have 23 library locations, which include our central library, which is our flagship branch. We have 20 community neighborhood branches across the city of Austin. We also have our Austin History Center, which serves as the city's archive and historical record. And then we also have a used bookstore, Recycled Reads, which operates our tool library as well as serves as a reuse store and helps mitigate some of items that could end up in the landfill and instead are resold and used to community. We are a city department, so we're city funded through tax funds, and then we serve a population size of about 1,000, or I'm sorry, not 1,000, a little over 1 million. Our service area recently expanded to include more parts of Travis County, and so through that service area, something else to note is that all students in the Travis County area or in the surrounding Austin area do qualify for student library cards, and those are free for students and are connected with their student ID. So every child, regardless if they're going to a public school, if they're homeschooled or going to a charter school, qualifies for a free library card with Austin Public Library. And so I mentioned that the city is a wonderful place to live. It is, however, it hasn't come without some barriers. And this is a map that was part of the data collection from the work from CCCN. And what this illustrates is the kind of inequitable access to nature. You'll see that the darker purple areas of Austin have limited access or nature deficient. There you have less access to tree canopies, to parkland, to waterways. And a lot of this stems from the city's strategic plan, which was developed in 1928. It was kind of living documentation of forced segregation. And so as a result of that city plan, a lot of infrastructure was invested into the west side of Austin and not invested on the east side. And so as a result, to this day, we see the inequitable access to critical resources like parklands, as well as city services. And a lot of this, I think you might be able to see my mouse, but this is I-35. And so because of the plan, it forced residents to be displaced to the eastern crescents of Austin. And all these blue dots are Austin Public Library locations. And so you can see that the majority of our locations, I mean, we're spread out throughout the city. And so the libraries, being in some of these darker purple areas, really serve as critical access points to nature and play an important role in that work. And so it is important that while we are acknowledging this, and I am talking about libraries as these wonderful places, there's also historical barriers to accessing library information. And so I definitely want to just add that to this conversation as well, that while the library was established in 1926, these services were and the buildings were shaped by segregation era policies. And we had separate but equal facilities. And it wasn't until 1951 that our library services were integrated. And so beyond Austin Public Library, libraries as a whole have a legacy of inequity. And so historically, public libraries were deliberately designed to limit access to people through restrictive policies and exclusionary practices. And so it's important to acknowledge this because as we're talking about libraries serving as nature connections, we have, and this has impacted libraries because we have so much work to do in terms of creating and making sure that libraries are a place where truly everybody does feel welcomed and resources are being equitably shared. And so Austin Public Library has definitely taken incredible measures towards ameliorating some of these conditions. The library's goal is to serve as a model for equity, diversity, access, and inclusion. Our mission is to inspire all to discover, learn, and create. And in 2023, we had our strategic plan approved. And so we have new strategic priorities, which are listed on this slide. And a lot of these, again, we're able to embed nature into these strategic priorities. And so the final thing I'll share in terms of background and context is that the library's approach and CCCN's approach, we use a systems change approach as well as a collective impact approach. And so what this means is myself and the other kind of nature strategy chairs who are also working on their different initiatives really work and use these as our models to guide the decisions and to guide the work that we're doing in our respective locations. So at Austin Public Library, we really have been trying to embed it into all areas of our library operation, not just in one component, and really trying to take a holistic approach as to what it looks like to build in nature into our programs, into our services, and our facilities. And so that's the context. It was very heavy, but now let's talk a little bit about how the library went from StoryWalks to becoming a nature smart library. And really what was behind this work was the library had already been doing temporary story walks. We've already been doing programming pre kind of 2020. But right at the pandemic, so right when we noticed, when everything kind of shut down, we noticed that every families lost access to everything: the schools, libraries, parks, community centers. I still remember in Austin, our parks were kind of caged off, and so you couldn't access green spaces. And so there was a critical need for connections as well as a place for movement and learning, as well as there was a report that 32% of youth in Travis County were reporting the emotional distress. And so it was really important for the library to provide something for our community. We know that story walks are important because they help build resiliency, especially when they're shared amongst children and caregivers. They help support mental health, creativity, physical wellness. And then again, libraries are a great location for these because as potentially trusted sources in the community, they serve as great places for bridging both learning and outdoor kind of space use. And so why did the library choose story walks? Well, again, I mentioned we noticed a need, and we thought that story walks would be a great opportunity. While our locations were physically closed, we were still providing curbside service, kits, outreach events, but we found that the story walks could serve as literacy connections for our library. Again, they promoted that physical activity and use of outdoor space, and again, serving as nature connections as well as providing opportunity for family engagement that happens beyond the wall. So we still wanted to create that connections with family, even though our doors were closed. And Austin Public Library, up until this time, had been doing temporary story walks, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But in 2021, we received a special projects grant from the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, which provided the library $25,000 towards installing 4 permanent library locations. I think it says 3, but it should be 4. But so what this did is we helped install, actually, here's what happened. We initially applied for 3 and were able to build in the 4th one. The goal was to ensure that the libraries were able to select nature-based themed books. And the goal, again, was to create engaging trails through kind of these laminated slides that would get inserted into these permanent aluminum posts. All of our story walks also incorporated QR codes so that we could build in engagement, as well as all the stories have some type of engagement activity that promotes movement, thinking, and just kind of engaging with the book beyond just reading and kind of moving from place to place. And so because of this grant, we were able to install these 4 story walks. What was great about this was that one of our 4th locations, we worked with the state library, which also has the talking book program, which is a department within the state library that provides services for blind and hearing impaired individuals. And so one of our library locations actually has an accessibility component that provides a Braille overlay on top of the story walk. And so individuals can experience the story walk both by reading it with sight or by feeling it with their hands. And so we're really excited about that collaboration and that opportunity to create that inclusive approach to story walks. And if you aren't familiar with StoryWalks, this is just like a quick snapshot of what they are. So they were created by Anne Ferguson in Vermont, and then StoryWalks are used not just in the United States, but around the world. It's again an innovative way to combine reading, physical activity, and the outdoors. And really what they are, it's just pages from a book, whether they're taken directly from a book or printed from a vendor or from the publisher, but they're mounted usually along a walking path, allowing families to read and engage and kind of move through this interactive experience. And how they work. And so the basic components is, I mean, really, we're picking materials that are have minimal text that are easy to kind of follow along with strong visuals. A lot of our books have these nature connections, especially seasonal nature connections. So we have different books that we can use throughout the year. Um, we display each page outdoors. Our permanent structures have a laminated material outside that mostly keeps them protected from weathering. And again, they're installed along a pathway or a trail. For our permanent structures, those we just slide in new material as we swap out the books. For our temporary ones, we pull them out for programming and then put them away. And again, they provide that wayfinding experience as well as engagement tools. So it is an opportunity to engage the public and potentially build in some type of public participation and public input through the story walks. And how they can be used, they can again be permanent installations or they can be temporary. So those can be set up at events like festivals, outreach events, seasonal programming. We partner a lot with conservancy groups. So we put some of our temporary story walks out along trails or when we have big events. And then they, again, could also be used as supplemental programming. So things like story times or nature walks or as literacy kits that we lend out to schools that are nearby. And then again, just thinking about how we can make them more accessible, something that we've been talking about. And so again, building in more Braille features of what it might look like to have an auditory component are things that our library has been thinking about and hoping to do in the expansion component. And so beyond the literacy connection, so StoryWalk is copyrighted. And so there's like a licensing component if you call something a StoryWalk. Other people call them other things like Tales and Trails or anything else that you can come up with that I'm blanking on right now. But if they don't display stories, they can be beyond this, right? So things that we've done is we've installed poetry that we've collected from the community. We've done opportunity to showcase community art. And so we've hosted art competitions and used the permanent fixtures to display our student art projects. It's also a way to highlight cultural and heritage through that storytelling and visual arts. And so an example of this is we had a Juneteenth celebration and wanted to include that historical component while people came to visit because there wasn't literature available to put into the story walks at that time. So really thinking about how beyond just the story walks, those posts could be activated to connect with community and tell those stories. Other opportunities are to create interactive exhibits using prompts, QR codes, opportunities to collect oral histories is another great way to use story walks. And again, they can also be used to incorporate like mindfulness and movement through those engagement components at each of the stations. And so I mentioned that Austin Public Library, oops, accidentally went to the very end. Oh no. Sorry. So Austin Public Library, again, we started with StoryWalks. That was kind of the first piece of it, but we have expanded to incorporate our Nature Smart Library beyond just the StoryWalks. And so I'll talk a little bit about the library's approach to Nature Smart Libraries and what that looks like, again, as we started with our StoryWalks and then have moved on and have incorporated more components. So there's 5 different ways in which like the buckets that the library is a Nature Smart Library. And this is, again, our approach to connecting families and children to nature through our spaces, our staffing, our services, our operations. And so one component is the literacy access, as well as our story walks, the green spaces and sustainable infrastructure, our nature-based programming, our green teens and sustainable operations, and finally through staff training and partnerships. And I'll touch on each of these throughout over the coming slides. And then again, at the end, we'll have time for Q&A. Because again, I know it's a lot of information, but it's all really exciting things that I love to share. So at APL, we have 4 permanent story walks across our library, 2 in North Austin and 2 in South Austin. And again, one of those story walks is features a Braille overlay that we work with our state library to translate, and then we put that adhesive over our story walk. And you'll see in this photo that's someone actually reading the story using the Braille overlay. We also do rotating of temporary story walks at events and outreach sites. So, for example, this weekend we have our annual kids block party happening this Saturday. And so we're going to be working with our Trail Conservancy to activate outdoor space. And we'll have temporary story walks kind of guiding people through the outdoor area. That's, again, just another way to engage family and connect them to literacy. In addition to our story walks, we also recently worked with our city's urban forestry division, and they helped us catalog all the trees on our library locations. And so now people can also do think tree tours. So you'll see in this bottom slide, people can scan that QR code and it'll take them to an inventory. And it's an interactive digital story map where people can learn about tree species at APL location. It helps promote tree identification, promotes environmental awareness, as well as plant-based learning. And so we work with this department to lead tree tours and then to also do kind of urban forestry, different programming. And so it's a different way to engage and to create these literacy connections outside beyond, again, just these story walks. But it's a great way. It's just on a yard sign. And when they get lost, we just ask for more and replace them and stick them out, stick them right back. And then beyond the story walks, the library also has a pretty robust collection. We have a nice size physical and digital material of nature-based books. We also have STEM nature kits and backpacks that we've worked with partners in the community to create. And so an example of this is we have a STEM kit, and so we worked with Bat International Conservancy to help build these kits. And so there's a little bat sonar sound detector that you plug into your phone. It also has books about bats, and so people can learn about bats and also hear bats. And we have those, and they're always checked out from our library. There's usually a hold on them. We also worked with Travis Audubon Society to create birding backpacks, which are great. Again, great, a long hold on these backpacks, but provides field guides, binoculars, kind of the entry level information and resources that you would need to start birding. I mentioned that we had a tool library. So part of the library's circulating collection is this tool library that provides basic gardening tools like shovels, weed eaters, or weed whackers, post diggers, power washers, also drills, things that you might need to kind of engage in some of this kind of like do it yourself things at home. We also have a seed collection at all of our library locations. And so we host monthly seed swaps and then restock our seeds. And then people can come and check out the seeds as they would like, and then replace them as their plants seed and grow. And some of these seed swaps have evolved to community swaps. And so now we have an upcoming community swap that's themed around homes and hobbies. And so anything related to homes and hobbies, people will come and swap out their items. And how this connects to nature, well, it helps mitigate items that are ending up in the landfill. And then again, just showcases the library as a place to provide this environmental education around sustainability and resilience and what it looks like to be kind of good stewards of our land. And so through while collections and the things that we circulate is one component of how the library is connecting children and families to nature, another way is through our green spaces and our sustainable infrastructure. And so the library has been working to install pollinator gardens and update our landscaping as it needs to be replaced to native landscaping so that we're not having to replace it as much. We're really excited that we were able to work with some folks to install pollinator garden at a few of our locations towards the end of the fall. And so this spring, the flowers have been blooming and it looks great. And now we're going to get to do programming around these pollinator gardens. We also, at our library locations, are working to provide more outdoor learning area or discovery area or play areas. This is a photograph of a piano that somebody donated to one of our branch locations that still works. Someone comes and makes sure that it's tuned up every now and then. But it's really great to just be outside and playing in nature and just experiencing the library space beyond the interior walls. Other things that the library is doing is sustainable movement, things like solar panels, electric vehicle charging stations, and more of that like green infrastructure to help again showcase that the library is working to being more resilient as well as helping the community move towards that themselves. And then again, just building in nature pathways and nature play into our locations is another thing we're working towards. This is a kind of quick inventory of our library locations. It's a lot of information, but this is how we're trying to track and make sure that all of our locations have some type of connecting point, whether it's through a story walk, whether it's through a garden, or whether it's an actual facility feature. And through what we're working on is hopefully building in those nature play pieces. And then coming soon this summer, we will have some interns that we're working with that'll help us identify those green infrastructure. So like the charging stations, the solar power panels, the air quality sensors, things that our community may be interested in knowing and learning more about, as well as potentially getting resources on how to do it themselves for their homes. And so another area that we build in nature is through our programming. It's honestly one of the easiest because we have so many community partners that we work with to help us provide that programming. We do year-round programming that's like core programming, like story time, playtime, book clubs. And so it was an easy way to embed it into those components and just picking books that were connecting to nature, connecting to seasons, or to things that we're trying to promote, like air quality, as well as building it into our signature and heritage months. And so that's been an interesting way to do it in terms of making sure that as we're making these nature connections, we're doing them in a culturally appropriate way and working with communities in which they're familiar with potentially gardening or plants, as well as holistic approaches to gardening and healing and using plants as a healing method. And then we also incorporate it into our summer programming, which is a pretty robust programming time because it's in the summer, and that's really when we're trying to reach all of our children in the Austin area to make sure that they're have access to equitable learning opportunities. And we like to build in those nature ones into our programming. And then we also do it through passive programming. So these could look like kits that are left out in the library locations that offer like magnifying glasses, kind of touch and feel, pattern recognition. And these are, again, a passive way to provide nature connections without having to do a full-on programming. And as I mentioned, we have partners that we work with that do outdoor activities, sustainable living, and pop-up services. All right. In terms of our green teens and sustainable operations, our libraries try to provide composting at events where we have food. We are a battery collection center. We also are a location to recycle batteries. We are hosting these community swaps. And then once the items are kind of left behind, we work with different community organizations to either donate the materials in a sustainable way or to make sure that these materials are going to a place that they can be used so that we're again mitigating them ending up in a landfill. And then generally just working with our staff to provide different opportunity and engagement opportunities with staff. So like biking to work and providing events like that where we're showcasing kind of sustainable living for the community. And in terms of staff training, before, like right around the pandemic, a couple of our staff went through Project Wild, which is offered through the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. It helps teach how to do learning through like unstructured play. It promotes creativity and increases physical activity. We also try to send staff to the Texas Children in Nature Summit. And so this coming year, it'll be in College Station in December. And then recently we were able to send staff to the Nature Everywhere conference, which was in St. Paul, Minnesota. And this provides our staff the opportunity to come back and train our staff. And so we use a train the train model. And really that's just how we're trying to get more staff on board to providing this and embedding it into their program. In terms of resources for our staff, we have circulating kits that aren't available to the public. So internally, we have a loose parts kit. Our Parks and Recreation has a kit that they check out to the public, but we have our own kit that we're able to share within our 23 locations. And so recently it went out to one of our locations for their outdoor program, and then they'll send it back and then it'll go to another location. We also have nature play kits that people can use indoors that involve more sensory component or a little smaller scale. And then this summer, we've developed some summer programming kits that'll go around all the different locations and will be featured as part of our summer programming. In addition to STEM kits that we're building out for that, it's like rock cleaning, things like that, that we can be using for programming. And as I mentioned, we are trying to build in the train the trainer model and really tap into the networking calls and meetups that we have in our area as places to share resources and to build those partnerships for programming. And finally, speaking of partnerships, these are just a few of the different groups that we work with. We work with probably our Parks and Rec is probably one of our #1 partners, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. We work with a lot of local gardening groups, our county master gardeners. We also work with some city departments like our Office of Sustainability and Waste Management. And then we build, again, a lot of our partners through our regional network calls. And so I'll mention, this is what we're working on. If anybody needs or would like to work with us, please reach out. And that's, again, kind of how we begin our partnerships. A lot of the partnerships we have, again, connect with our conservancy groups that are on the trail or waterways. But we're always open to working with new people. The library, I will say, we are not short of finding partners. The issue that we have is being very strategic about it. And so our approach is really on what's the need that we're trying to build, how do we engage with these partners, how do I match them with the different locations based on their need or their community input that they've been wanting to see, and then just going through that partnership process of like formalizing it, assigning roles and responsibility, and just evaluating to make sure that the partnerships are things that we want to continue to sustain, or are they partnerships that we're going to expand and continue to grow. And that's always the goal, is just continuing to grow and enrich our partnerships so that it's just sustained and built into the work. kind of final takeaways in terms of our library's efforts, things that we're working on, which we're hopefully going to be installing more pollinator gardens and nature play at our library locations, continuing to update our landscaping as it, doesn't sustain the freeze or the drought. We're trying to replace those with native plants so that hopefully they require less maintenance and are also good for our pollinators and local ecosystem. We're also trying to update our story walks in terms of accessibility, so making sure that the pathways are accessible, signage is accessible. We're really excited that we're going to have some eco-rise interns to help promote a green career in the library, and then continuing to build our partnerships with city departments. Some of our library locations are not necessarily, they don't have access to green space. And so the other thing we're working on is activating green spaces nearby these library locations through partnerships. And so an example of this is one of our locations is right outside downtown, doesn't have a lot of green space. And so the youth librarian there has been going to community spaces like Festival Beach to host her story time and working with partners. And what this does is it helps showcase both our mission and the partners' mission and brings in a good audience to learn about the area that we're activating. And then in terms of other future things, we're hoping to receive some grant funds that would help us develop more sensory kits that would promote nature play, as well as additional story walks and potentially program funding and staff training. And so I know this was a lot of information. I think I left about 15 minutes of time for Q&A. This QR code will take you, as well as the link at the bottom, will take you to a list of materials that are available for checkout at our library collection. If you are not in Austin, these books may be available in your area as well, but they'll just provide some general information on nature play and kind of the core components of a nature smart library as it relates to early childhood development. And I just want to, if you are in the Austin area and want to sign our Austin Outdoor Bill of Rights for our children, you can do that by signing or scanning the QR code, and you can sign our Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights to ensure that all children have access to nature. And that is it for me. So yeah, thank you so much for hanging in here and hearing all about the library and the work that we're doing. I'm happy to answer any questions and provide any insight or open up the area just for conversation around this topic.
Thank you, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any questions out there? I have one with all of this information. What is one step
Mm-hmm.
that they can do kind of right away? Where would you start?
Yeah. Yeah, if you are at a library, I would say one thing you could do is just take an inventory of what you're already currently doing, and just so that you can see a bigger snapshot of the work that you're already contributing towards connecting children and families to nature. I think oftentimes that work can get unseen or isn't as recognized because it's all separate. And if you're in a library, I think you'll know what I mean. It's just like very siloed. So really looking at it from like a bird's eye view of like, how are we providing nature education in our programs? Like, what do our gardening things look like? What are our sustainable operations? And beginning to capture those stories so that you can see as your system or as a branch or as a single location, like see what your impact is, because I would imagine it's actually pretty big and sometimes it gets lost in the mix. And if you're not at a library, just thinking about how you might be able to partner with your library, either through providing programming or providing kits or seeing, what unique thing that your library or that your organization is doing that might be able to support, and both of you can work together to support each other's missions.
I love those. Yeah.
Hmm.
Sometimes it is. You're doing more than you think.
Hmm.
So here's a couple of questions. If we wanted to create a story walk, what would you suggest for yard signs?
Yeah, there's a couple different things that you can do. There's like more robust kind of metal frames that you can buy, like at Home Depot or one of those that you kind of stick in cardstock that you um, kind of laminate or kind of do whatever it is to compile it. Or you can use those A-frame yard sign ones that are easy. I have heard from branch staff they prefer the lighter ones versus the heavier A-frame ones because they're heavier and hard to move. And so it's easy to go out and set up the yard sign ones very quickly before a program and then picking them up. And then if they get lost or damaged, you're not, you know, totally out in that you could buy a few more of those kind of easy to stick in versus the heavy metal ones that take a little bit longer to install and then are harder to kind of move around and move from location to location. So I would recommend those like yard sign ones and then knowing that they're not going to last very long but hopefully you'll be if they're used for programming you'll be able to get a couple uses out of them.
Very good.
Hmm.
And then the next question is, where do you recycle the batteries?
Yeah, so all of our library locations are have a bucket and or a box for battery recycling. So people come in and drop off their batteries, and then we work with a city department called Austin Resource Recovery. They're kind of our waste management group, and they help us make sure that those batteries get recycled and end up where they need to, and that most importantly, they don't end up in the landfill.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think the only thing is like we have a size limit. Like, so if it doesn't fit in the bucket, we can't take it.
Sure. That makes sense.
Hmm.
You get some interesting things.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you give some examples of engagement prompts that are included in your story walks? Is there somewhere that they can look for examples?
You know, the if you Google StoryWalks, and it's connected to a library location in Vermont, they have a lot of resources to just kind of get you started. But in terms of engagement, I would say something to think about is like whatever the story is, what is it that you're trying to encourage people to do? Are you encouraging movement? Are you encouraging kind of the senses? And that's usually what our story walks tend to do in terms of engagement is we try to activate all the different senses. And so one engagement prompt might be like, you know, you're the stories like talking about trees or something like listen to the leaves, like what do you hear, what animals do you hear around you, like if you and then the same thing like what besides look around, like what are like five different red items that you see that are the same color as the butterfly. And so activating the senses, encouraging movement are great ways to build in those engagement.
Good, excellent.
Hmm.
Our next question is, can you tell us more about the Think Trees tour? What did you
Yes.
all use to host the tour?
Hmm.
Um, and then was there any cost involved?
So there wasn't any cost on our end at this time because we partnered with this another city department, and so they paid for all the posters, all the material. They translated the material. They're also hosting the map. Right. So they did all
Mhm.
the work and we were just like, yeah, come inventory our trees. This sounds wonderful. Yasmin, if you're able to drop a link to that in the chat, it if you want to just Google Think Tree Tours Austin, it'll give you that full page. But really, and if you're interested, I'm happy to connect you to the person that kind of spearheaded this campaign. His name is Marcos Martinez. He's a bit biased because he came from the library, and so when he went and worked at this department, this was one of the first projects he did for his organization. It just happened to work out that he loved libraries, he knew about the libraries, and so now we work with that department. This past weekend, we hosted a tree tour outside of our central library, and so we had about maybe 20 people show up and they learned about the different trees from tree to tree in terms of like identifying what the trees are, as well as like figuring out like if there's some type of thing to be concerned about, like this might have a disease. This is when is a good time to maybe call someone to come in so that you're not losing the entire tree, which I recently learned about. Like there was a mushroom growing at the bottom. They're like, yeah, these we don't want these mushrooms growing. This is a sign of disease. And if it gets worse, then you lose the risk of having to chop down the tree, which is incredibly expensive. And then also, you lose that tree canopy. So I'm happy to share the link as well as the contact if you want to know more about their approach to creating that tree tour.
Excellent.
Mhm.
What's amazing is the collaboration between the city departments.
Mhm.
It's just incredible in Austin. Let's see, Mary Ellen would like to know, can you suggest some of the nature-related books that have been well received?
Yeah, one of the ones that I think I've seen a lot of libraries use is oh, and I'm going to blank on the name right now, is Mariposa. It's about butterflies. But there's also a list of children's books that are nature themed, and they're like kind of a book list provide like that other people have vouched for, and I forget the name of it. Um, is it Blue Bonnet book? No, not the Blue Bonnet. Those are Texas library books that are picked by Texas librarians. But I'll find that list as well too. But I would say when thinking about the books, whether they're nature based or not, just making sure that they're not very text heavy. There are specific vendors, and also how you're going about the book. So if you're doing the story walk yourself, typically we buy two copies of the book because so that we can take them apart and use front and back for the different displays. So you may not want a really long book as well, because then those are a lot of installations you're going to have to create. And then the other component too is like if you're going with a vendor, some vendors may have story walks that are you print them, you own the copyright, and they're easy to go. I will say too that with copyright, I'm not a copyright librarian or a lawyer, but you never also want to translate because then you get into infringement. So finding books either in the original language or that aren't very long and that are easy and have visual imagery that are easy to use for picture books.
Excellent.
Mhm.
All right. Do we have any other questions out there? I think those were wonderful questions.
Oh, and I see in the chat that Yasmin dropped the link to the tree tours. Melody shared that it's called the Blueberry Award list, and she also dropped a link to. I was close, and then yeah, and if my contact information is still here, so I'll also drop that in the chat. You're welcome to email me if you have any follow-up questions too.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Laura. This was very informative and enjoyable, and we certainly appreciate your time. So, everyone here, I have dropped a link to the evaluation for today. If you could take a quick moment to fill that out. And then again, we are taking proposals for the summit. So please, if you're feeling moved to do so, send in a proposal. And there's a link to that in there too. So thank you all again. Thank you for taking your time to be with us this afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.